Hi, and welcome to the third video in our PowerShell and Elasticsearch video series. In the last video, we finally connected to our Elasticsearch instance through PowerShell, and we were able to get the basic info from our instance. In this video, we're actually going to be taking a look at creating a mapping for our index, for our test index that we're going to be using throughout this series. We're going to be creating a log instance. So basically we're going to be able to store items that are relating to logs. So we're going to write a little script that's actually going to write to that log instance. And then we're going to be able to actually fetch those entries via either command line, or if you do bring up like a Cabana dashboard, you can also look at it through there as well, or any other programming interface that could actually interact with APIs. You would actually be able to pull those entries back. So I'm just going to go over some of the basics here of what a mapping is. So a mapping in Elasticsearch is really a schema that we're going to be using for our documents or our items that we're going to be storing in Elasticsearch, or our index in Elasticsearch. Now the mapping will typically consist of multiple properties. So what we can actually do is compare a mapping to a table in a SQL database, and then we can compare the properties to the columns in a SQL database. So that might help you just kind of grasp a little bit better of what it kind of looks like. Now, Elasticsearch is by no means a SQL database. It is much more similar to a NoSQL database, very similar to like MongoDB with the document structure. Now, Elasticsearch doesn't actually need us to create the mappings. It can auto-generate them as we put in items. The only issue with that is it might not match the proper data type to the data that's going in it. That can cause some issues that you might expect it to, per se, put in a date field, but it might actually put it in as a long or as an integer or as text, depending on what it detects. And then also it could cause what's called a mapping explosion, which can cause a performance issue as your data sets grow bigger. Now you can store a lot of many types of properties in the mappings. We're going to go over some of the properties today. We're not going to be going over all of them, but I will be putting a link in the description that'll have a link to all the different types that you can put in Elastic, and that'll be directly from the Elastic website. And once we get to that part, I'll go over some of the different properties that you could put in as well. So let's actually go ahead and let's get started with the first part, which is really going to be the same part as we did for the connection. We really want to put in the header information, so the username, the password, get that credential object created. So I'm actually just going to paste that directly from the last video into this one. If you haven't watched the last video to just get that basic connection in, make sure you actually watch that video. Make sure that you can connect to it properly. And once you can do that, definitely feel free to continue on with this video. So once we have our credentials in here and everything, we can actually go ahead and start creating our mapping for our log index in Elasticsearch. So the way that we create a mapping in Elasticsearch is with the put method. So we actually do need a body as well for the mapping. And the body is actually what's going to contain the meat and potatoes of the mapping, which is going to be written in a JSON format. So let's go ahead and let's create a variable here called body. And we're going to create that as a literal string. So that is just the @ symbol and double quotes. And then Visual Studio Code will end it for you automatically with the double quote and @ symbol as well. And let's go ahead and let's first just put a open and close curly brackets and go into it. And then what we're going to want to do is put the word mappings inside of double quotes. So all the words that you're going to be really typing in here all have to be surrounded by double quotes for it to be taken in properly. And then we're going to put a colon, and then we're going to put another pair of curly brackets, and we're going to be going in it. Now what we need to do is we need to say to Elasticsearch that we are adding our properties to our mappings. So we're going to do a double quote, and we're going to put in properties. And we're going to put a double quote here to end it. And we're going to do another colon and then another open and closing curly bracket. And now here we can actually put in our properties. So what we're going to first do, since we are creating this for logs, The main thing that I really want to store for storing logs is really going to be the time that the action or error happened, the server name of which that was running it, the application, which application could be also the script name, and then we want the type of error or the type of, it could be information, it could be an action, it could be an error message, and then the actual message itself. So those are all the different fields that we're going to be putting in here. So let's actually start off with the timestamp. So let's put in timestamp here in double quotes once again, and we're going to put a colon, and then we're going to do again an open and closing curly bracket. And directly in the open and closing curly bracket, we're going to put in type inside of some double quotes. And then the type we're going to give it is going to be a date type. Then after the closing curly bracket, we're just going to put a comma in here. And then we could put in another property. So let me just break this down once again. So this is going to be the name of our property. And then after here, after the colon is where we give Elasticsearch all the information that it needs to, how to store that data. So here we are storing it as a date type. So here you can have IP, you can have text, you can have integer, you can have bool. There are plenty of different types that you can store. We are just making a very basic log index, so we aren't going to have anything fancy. The next few are going to be a little bit fancier because we're actually going to be doing a double field inside of a field. I'm going to explain that once we get to it. But there are a lot of other types. Like I said, I'm going to be putting that link in the description so you'll have access to all the different types that you can actually end up using. And then what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to put in our next property here, which is going to be our server name. Now, in here, you could in fact just put the type in double quotes, and then you can put colon text here if you wanted in double quotes, and this would be fine. This would actually work for the majority of what we're doing, but if you ever wanted to use Kibana and make some dashboards based on it, this is where the limitations would actually hit you. It wouldn't actually work very, very well. So what we're actually going to be doing is after the opening curly bracket, we're just going to hit enter here. So it's going to put our type text on the next line. And then after the closing double quote on text, we're just going to put a comma here. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in an analyzer as well. Now the analyzer probably isn't super useful for server name, depending on how your server names are. But this will basically tell Elasticsearch how to break down the different words that are going to be inserted. So if your server names are separated by a dash, you can actually search by before the dash or after the dash. Or if you have some server names that have 1 and 2s at the end, maybe you have multiple servers that have the same name and then just have 1, 2 through the number of servers that you have. It could just allow you to search for those a lot easier with the analyzer. And then we're going to put another comma here. And then we're going to put the, in double quotes always, fields, and then colon, and then another open and closing curly bracket. We're going to hit enter here. And then in here, we are going to put raw in double quotes, and then put another colon, and then put another open and closing curly brackets. And we are going to put type in double quotes, and then keyword in double quotes after the colon here. And then this is what it should end up looking like. So you have all your matching curly brackets. The nice thing about Visual Studio Code is it will actually show you that they all match up nicely. So what we're looking at is this right here. So what we have here is we have the, again, the property name. Now the base type for this property is actually a text. So it's just a text field. This makes it a lot easier to search on Elasticsearch because text is not case sensitive. So it'll be a lot easier to search for. And then we have our analyzer that will and we set it to English, so it'll use the English dictionary, so it'll be a lot easier to search for again. And then we have fields raw type keyword. Now what this will do, this will actually add another field in our Elasticsearch that will be of type keyword. Now keyword is very similar to, not similar to an ID or a primary key, but it is a very case sensitive search. So you would actually have to search for the entire server name in the exact case that it's written in order for it to show up. But what this allows you to do, it also allows you to build dashboards in Kibana. Once we actually go and see Kibana, we will actually be able to build dashboards based on this mapping. And I want us to be able to do this without deleting the mapping and recreating it. There are ways to update a mapping, which involves creating another index and then migrating the data over from one index to the other, and then creating an alias. But we're just going to be sticking to the basics for this first tutorial here. So if ever we need to recreate the mapping, we're going to be deleting the mapping and recreating it. I'm going to be showing you guys how to delete the mapping. If you ever need to delete the mapping in this series, you will know how to be able to recreate the mapping. So after the server name here, we're just going to put in another comma here. And all we're actually going to do is copy this whole section of server name, and we're going to be pasting it in, and we're going to put in application name as our other one. And then we're going to be pasting it again, and we're going to be putting type as another one. And then after the comma from type, we're going to be putting in one last property here. And our property that we're going to be putting in is going to be message. And this one, we just want it to be of type text. Because this one, we probably won't need for the Kibana dashboard. It's just going to be the message. What we really want to know in the dashboard, what I'm thinking right now, is we want to know by server, by application, how many errors are maybe popping up, or how many times, how many actions are being taken by those. And this way we can see if there's any like outlying scripts that are running at night. Maybe you have a script that is generating accounts. Well, you can store how many accounts it's creating. Every time it creates an account, you can put a type of create, and you can see how many creates are going on. And then if you ever have one day that you have like 1,000 creates, that might be something to look at. Or if you're also doing a deletion, if you have a very abnormal amount of deletions, you can also then go look at it a lot easier because it'll be on a dashboard that you can actually see. So once we actually have our mapping created, what we actually need to do is actually call our API from Elasticsearch and create that mapping. So what we need to do is we need to just create a variable. Well, I like to create a variable called response, and we're going to make that equal to invoke rest method. Now you don't need to make this equal to a variable, but I find it very useful to just be able to go see afterwards what that response was equal and make sure that everything just worked out properly. So once we have our invoke rest method here, we could then put in our URI. And our URI, as we've seen in the last video, is going to be https:// 172.30.123.17:9200. Now this IP address will be different for you. You will need to get that from your Ubuntu box or your Linux server that you have installed Elasticsearch on it. So mine is right here. So that is going to be the IP address that I use to connect to it. And then the 9200 again is just that port for Elasticsearch. And then what we want to do is do another backslash and then put the name of our mapping. Now, one thing to keep note with mappings in Elasticsearch, they have to be fully lowercase. You cannot have any uppercases, or else it will give you an error message. And then the method here that we're going to put is going to be the put method. And then the headers is going to be the header object. And then the body that we're going to be passing in is going to be our body here. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a skip certificate check. And then what we can actually do is just do our response, and we can pipe that to convert to JSON. And let's actually go ahead and let's run this entire thing here. And here we have it. So if everything works correctly, you should see, if we actually just run this here, you should actually get this message in your response. You should get acknowledged true, shards acknowledged true, and index is logs. So we created our index logs and then our mapping. Now, if you wanted to actually just confirm what the mapping is in your Elasticsearch, we can actually do that as well with another invoke REST method. So let's actually just put this here. Let's put a comment at the top here, and let's just put create an index mapping. And then let's go ahead and let's fetch a mapping here. So what we can actually do is create our response again and do an invoke REST method URI. And then what we want to put for our URI is once again just HTTPS // Actually, what we can do here, actually, we're not going to do that for now. We're just going to put it in manually. But what you could do is you could definitely store this in a variable. You just have to repeat it a little bit less. But some of these URIs are a little different. So you would have to still type in some things, but you could definitely put in this part in a variable. This way you would never have to type it out again and just have to type out some of these other parts here. So to get our mapping, we need to actually go ahead and do the IP address :9200 /logs / mapping. And then what we want to do is our method is going to be the get method. And then we want to pass in the headers. And we want to do the skip certificate check again. And if we actually go ahead and run this, let's just copy paste the response, convert to JSON. And if we run that, now you will see you do get a warning: resulting JSON is truncated as serialization has exceeded the set depth of 2. Now we've actually seen this before in our JSON video. If you do want a little bit more depth on the JSON, you can just go ahead and put the depth. For us, I think 7 will work, or even 6, but we can just put 10 here. And here is our mapping. So there is the mapping that we've fully created. So you can see that everything is taken in nicely. So that is all good. And what we can actually even do as well is delete our index or delete our mapping here. And to do that is, so to delete a mapping index, once again, as you've probably guessed it, it is just another invoke REST method. And let's go ahead and let's actually create a variable here, because I don't want to keep typing this all the time. So let's go ahead and let's create this right up here. So let's go URI base, and that base is going to be HTTPS ://172.30.123.17:9200. And that should be good. So if I actually just run this here, and we can actually replace this here with just a URI base. And we can actually replace this with URI base as well. And we could replace this with URI base. And once we actually have that in there, to delete, what we just need to do is once again specify our index here. And then the method is going to be, you probably guessed it, it's going to be the delete method. And we are going to just pass in our headers here. And then the skip certificate check. And we can actually just copy paste this response here. So if we actually run this, we will get just an acknowledged true. And now if we actually try to fetch the mapping, we will see that we actually get an error message here. And it says no such index logs. So our log index is not actually found. So we would actually have to go ahead and run this entire top part again. And we would have created our index. And now we can actually go ahead and fetch our index again. So that is the basics of creating a mapping or an index in Elasticsearch completely through PowerShell. Now, this could be very useful, especially if you're doing infrastructure as code. You could build out your whole template, building out using PowerShell. And then this way, if you ever need to bring up another one, you can just run that code. Now, of course, you can always write these in any language because Elasticsearch, as long as the language has API capabilities that you can call APIs, you can definitely write anything for Elasticsearch with it. So we're just doing the whole series through PowerShell. Hopefully you guys find this useful. In the next video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at inserting our items in here. So we're going to be actually just putting in some test data. We're not going to be actually writing a script to put well, we're going to be writing a PowerShell script to put data in, but we're not going to be actually writing out a legitimate script that's actually putting log elements in it. We're just going to be inserting log elements directly in it. And then we're going to be updating those. We're going to be searching on those, and we're going to be deleting all of those as well. So we have a lot left to learn in Elasticsearch. There is a lot to do in Elasticsearch. It's extremely powerful. The searching capabilities are where it shines. We're going to see a lot of different ways to search as well in PowerShell with Elasticsearch. So if you guys have any comments or questions, please let me know in the comment section down below. I will be glad to help. And if it's something that is a little bit more general, I will definitely make a video on it as well. If you guys want to, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Also make sure to hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out. And I will see you guys on the next video.